News Talk 1400 KFRU is proud to present the KFRU Heritage Series. It's a 1-hour perspective on the events and the people whose lives have contributed to the heritage of Boone County. Listen each Sunday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The KFRU Heritage Series. From News Talk 1400 KFRU.
We are coming up on, I think we've done this program for about 10 months. We'll come up on the first year of the Heritage Program at the 1st of February. And part of the Heritage Program's purpose is to introduce our listeners to people that they have probably known or have heard of. And I think we've got a special treat on this particular program because we're going to delve into the world of music. And I can't remember, and John Duncan is the producer of this show, I can't remember having a conversation where we'll talk as much about the fine arts and music side as we will today with our guest, who I'll introduce in a moment. I want to say one more thing about the guests that we interview and that we talk to. Many of us who come to the community at a certain point in our lives and a certain point in history, we only know people from that starting point on. Sometimes we're fortunate enough to go back in their lives, and the Heritage Show has given us an opportunity to delve more into background of people that maybe we just know, as this particular case, as the maestro and as the conductor of the Missouri Symphony when he was doing that, and that's Hugo Vianello. It's very nice to talk to you again. How are you today?
I'm very fine, thank you.
So we're going to pick your brain about some things maybe that are prior to Columbia life, and they've been covered in other media at times, but I think it's going to be interesting to our listeners to talk about that. But let's start kind of in midstream. When did you come to Columbia? When are you connected to Columbia?
Well, we came, my wife and my 3 children, we came here in 1968. And actually looked for a place to live for one whole week. We came back. We were living in Evanston, Illinois at the time. And we came to Columbia, and I wanted to find a place out in the country where I, as a displaced New Yorker, I really wanted to have horses. And I wanted to go the cowboy route. And I decided that Columbia was a good place to do that. And we finally bought a house after 6 days of looking around. I almost despaired of doing that. But in 1968...
Was it in the country? I mean, did you have horses?
Yeah. We were down south, and we wound up having 3 horses. And I think, quite honestly, some of the happiest times of my life were when we used to go on trail rides with the kids, and it was fun. We had a pond on the property, and we used to run the horses full speed through the water.
Really?
Yeah, it was really great. Great
Were you
time.
on the back of them when they were running through the water like that? So right into
never
the
fell
pond.
off. Never fell off.
Amazing. That would be kind of a fun little thing to do. Ever take the stress away from other things that are going on.
Right.
Highlight. We'll come back and talk in more details about certain things that you're probably going to mention now. But I'm curious as to help people plot. You came in 1968 to Columbia. What was the offer that brought you here?
Well, it was kind of weird. My contract with Northwestern University terminated, and I tried to figure out what I was going to do. And I had 2 offers, actually, at that time. One was Lexington, Kentucky, and another one was Stevens College.
Horse country in Lexington. I mean, if you wanted horses, you need to go to Lexington, right?
That is right. Maybe I should have gone there. But
No, I don't think so.
No, the reason I chose Stevens College was that I was somewhat enamored of the place, the Stevens College itself, because I had been, prior to that, before I had gone up to Northwestern, I had been the assistant conductor in Kansas City. And at which time we played at the Stevens College, and they fed us. And all at that time, it was a different kind of a school in many respects. Mm-hmm. All the women students there had to dress up and for dinner and all that. And I was really very impressed when I went to dinner, and the students sang Grace and also said a prayer before eating. And I said, gosh, and my daughter was, she wasn't born at that time. And I said, if I ever have a daughter, I will send her to Stevens College. And so that was one of the things. The other thing, too, was I had a series of summer concerts in Kansas City that lasted for about 7 years. And I used to go from Chicago to Kansas City every summer and just conduct these concerts. And so this made it easier for me.
So how long were you at Stevens College?
Off the top of my head, I think it was 13 years.
So that was in the late 60s to the early 80s.
81, something like that.
Tell us about the music program that you did at Stevens College.
Well, they refer to it as the golden years. And at that time, there were two other fellows that, besides myself. I did the orchestra, and the Val Pataki did the direction and trained the singers, and Ed Gallagher did the sets and also stage direction. And we put on some fantastic shows and operas. I mean, we managed to have a 72-piece orchestra that would do Music Man or whatever it was, or the first staged Nutcracker here in town, and with the full symphony orchestra. It was really wonderful years. The operas themselves, excuse me, the operas themselves, we would hire people from the Met to come down and sing. And so when we did the operas like Tales of Hoffmann, Di Virgilio would come in and do the tenor part, and of course the students would sing with them. They were trained, and they would interact on stage. It was really a fantastic thing. I think I did something like 14 operas in the time that I was there in 13 years. So.
Hugo Vianello is our guest. We're talking about his years with Stevens College. Of course, we'll branch out and talk about much more, and we think of him as a key portion of the classical music influence in this community and also at the Missouri Theater. But I bet when you're talking about performing those operas and performing with a symphony and with an orchestra from Stevens College, you did that in the auditorium that is now not used, and we've found recently in news going to be, in all likelihood, torn down to make way for some kind of an academy. But that was and
unfortunately, I hate to see it go because it's really I was instrumental in the purchase of the Missouri Theater, but however, the best acoustics in this town is in that auditorium.
Really?
Yeah, I think, or at least it was. Nice big stage, and it seats 3,300 people. At least that's what it did at the time.
I've been in there for some events. I thought it was a terrific venue for all those, for concerts and other activities, including graduation, which Stevens used to have in there.
Right.
Describe the move from Stevens College then to what came next when you were in Columbia. What led you to the next step after Stevens College?
Well, during the time in 1970, we actually, my wife and I and several other people, started the Missouri Symphony, the Missouri Symphony Society, and that's history in itself. But what we did during those years is try to influence young people to study music and classical music. And what was the question again?
I was asking you how you started that while you were still at Stevens,
yes,
correct? But then was it able to sustain a full-time maestro, conductor, in the 80s? Was that what led you to leave Stevens College?
Well, the program itself, of course, was primarily during the summertime. And so as a result of that, there really wasn't any conflict because I was off from Stevens during the summer. It was a labor of love, really, and there wasn't anything like that. I recall somebody saying, well, Hugo, we tried starting an orchestra over here and several times, and it didn't work. And I said, well, then I have nothing to lose because if I lose, it doesn't make any difference. But it didn't. It flourished, actually. And many of the kids that we had, and they were kids, they were young people, became professional musicians after that. I was really happy about that.
So that would have been the first orchestra that Columbia had.
I don't know about that. At least it was the first orchestra.
There was nothing like that was here
That
for
was
several
here
years
when
before
I
you did that.
came,
You would
no.
have the school orchestras, but you're talking about a professional orchestra that would have presented
we started out as a youth orchestra.
a youth. And you're talking youth being what ages then?
From 10 or so to 22. What happened is that eventually all the kids graduated, and we didn't have it anymore. But we were able to put a 50-member orchestra together. And, of course, we started the chorus, which was another 50 people, and then a band, which had 72 people, and we hired conductors and people to take care of these things. It worked out really quite well, but eventually the kids graduated and went on, and we decided that what we would do is just hire some professionals to help with the kids. But eventually it evolved into a fully professional orchestra.
What was the situation at the Missouri Theater at the time that all this was taking place? Some of us would know some of the history of the Missouri Theater, but when you look at that area there, was that no longer being used as a movie theater? It wasn't a theater that was being very successful at that point in time?
I believe Commonwealth was the the company that owned the theater. In fact, they owned several theaters in town. And I happened to be walking down the street one day, and I was really looking for a venue for us to play in because we used to put on our concerts at the university, and actually in a very small place in the recital hall that was there. And somehow or other we had a scheduling problem, and we were not able to utilize any of their space. And so I really tearing my hair out, so to speak, trying to figure out where would we put the orchestra for the summer concerts. So we tried a number of places, and finally I hit upon the Missouri Theater and figured I'd go in and see David Love, I guess it is, David, and ask him whether we could possibly rent this. I didn't really think we had a chance of doing that. And he says, why don't you buy the theater? I said, buy the theater? I said, how can we afford this? And I said, let me see what I can do. And I had the authority to write a check, and I wrote a check for $1,000 and gave it to him as sort of escrow to say, okay, hold it for us until I talk to my board. Make a long story short, the board liked the idea of the theater, but a fellow named David Harrison, who was also on the board. He and I were sort of in cahoots on this, and I really owe it to him. He's the guy that really did it. But we managed to get a loan, which I reported to the board and said, we have this loan for half of the amount of the theater. And at that time, I think this was in 1987. And so the rates were really kind of high, about 18-19% interest. And I got it at 10%. Wow. Everybody said that was really great.
Yeah.
But they asked, what are you going to do with the rest of the money?
The other half.
And I said, well, we went down to Department of, what is it called? Natural Resources.
I understand what you're, NEA? You went to Jefferson City to the department there?
Yeah.
Missouri Council of Arts or something like that?
No, it's the Missouri Department of... Well, anyway, it was one of the organizations there that provided money for natural
revitalizing older buildings.
Right.
I got you. Okay.
But it has a name. I'm sorry, I'm getting older and older. and so what happened was that I reported to the board and said, we have the money from them. They will loan us half of the money at 5% interest. And I said that. I was lying, actually. I said that, and the reason I said that was because I wanted to have something in reserve.
Uh-huh.
And so, 5%, wow, gee, that's great. And then I had to confess, and I said, I was really lying to you. It's at no interest.
So
they couldn't, I had an offer they couldn't refuse.
Exactly. They liked 5, and they loved 0.
Right.
And again, people keep in mind that this was a time, as our guest said, when interest rates during that time period were extremely high compared to what they are now. I mean, now people can get close to 1-2% on certain big projects, but this was a 0%. Hugo Vianello is our guest. We're going to pause here in the story, and we'll come back and we'll talk more with him when we continue. You're listening to the Heritage Show on News Talk 1400 KFRU.
This is the KFRU Heritage Series. More coming up on News Talk 1400 KFRU. This is the KFRU Heritage Series.
Hugo Vianello is our guest on our Heritage Show this week at News Talk 1400 KFRU. We were following the story of the starting of what would be the Missouri Symphony Society, I would suppose, and this is something that started with the youth orchestra during summers. We mentioned, I asked the maestro to talk about how Missouri theater became synonymous with the Missouri Symphony Society, and he was talking about needing a place to find for performances, and stopped in, talked to, and the name slipped both of our minds here in the first segment. It was David Jones. David Jones used to run.
Right.
He ran the theater down there, and this was truly a theater where you could go in and watch movies. I can remember this.
Well, on the stage itself, when we went backstage behind the curtain, actually, the Commonwealth used that really as a workshop. They had built some kind of a shop in there with the saws and everything else to fix seats and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But
was the stage that big?
Oh,
there?
yeah.
So the stage was there. You didn't have to change the stage.
The stage was there in bad shape. It didn't have a shell. We built a shell. And all volunteers, so everybody that came to help, and we spent many a day and night and weekend, just building a shell and clouds over the thing.
You remember what the purchase price was of the theater at that time?
Yes, it was $370,000, and I decided that what we needed was an extra $30,000, which was incorporated in the price. And the reason we added that money was to make some repairs in office space and so on, because there was no sense in spending money for other places for rent. So anyway, so it was 370. Actually, the two notes were for 400,000.
Mm-hmm. What kind of condition was it in when you first took possession of it?
Backstage was all the wires, electrical connections between the stage and the house itself were all cut. Had been cut by, and so we had no lights on stage. And we spent actually 14 days just trying to get ready for the first opening concerts.
So what time of year did you purchase this? Spring?
I know the date. It was we signed the contract on December 28th. At December 28th of 1986. And then we took possession on January 16th of 1987.
Do you remember, you said you have 14 days of solid work trying to get it ready for the first concert?
Yeah, it was in June sometime.
Do you remember what that first concert was like in this new building?
It was, very happy kind of a thing, because we finally got a string of lights fixed. Compared to what it is now, it's no comparison.
Sure.
But we got them up. We lit up the stage, and people came in, and the air conditioning was working but making a lot of noise. And it was really kind of funny in a way, because people got wise after a while because the air conditioning was as you look at the stage, on the left side of the auditorium on the other wall. And when it would go on, which we were happy to have the air conditioning, but when it went on, it just made so much noise. And eventually the people in the audience wound up moving to the
right
other side. And so, I would be conducting from stage to the left side of the audience. But and when it rained, the water would come seeping in, and I can't begin to tell you. I have a picture someplace of my wife scraping the walls in the guest rooms, and it was. I've told a story before, and to give you some idea. If one wanted to use the facilities, the restroom, he would actually, in my case, I'll admit to the secret, I usually like to use the facilities before I go out on stage.
Sure, that makes sense.
And so what I would do is, because you could hear the flushing of the toilet, I would wait until the concertmaster went out,
warm it up,
and the concertmaster would go out, and everybody would applaud, and then I would flush. Anyway.
Hugo Vianello was our guest. We're talking about Missouri Theater in the early years of becoming a place for live music and for this kind of music. That would have been the youth orchestra then playing in that June of that would have been 1987?
No, 1987. We were
so you had
fully
the
professional.
And
I think the professional orchestra started in 1984 or something like that.
And you still remember the feelings of walking out on that stage on that very first concert, saying, "This is our building. It may not be beautiful or perfect yet, but this is fun to be in our house."
Well, I think I said something similar to that when I did walk out for the first time. And not only that, there were other things to worry about. We used to. The other hall that we had was sat only about 300 people, so we had to do 2 concerts in the other hall. So on Thursday and Friday nights we would do concerts there. But when we bought the theater, well, we had 1,300 seats, 1,236 actually. And when we put on that concert, I had to figure out how do we fill up the hall and get all of these 600 people that we used to have to come to the other place. So, I mean, it didn't happen by magic, but a lot of people helped. And I would tell people from the stage that it would be really very nice to have all of the people there that were there. But what we would like to do is have them bring one person, just one person with them, so that we would double the audience. And eventually we built it up.
How did it grow over the years? How long were you maestro of the Missouri?
Excuse me, 28 years actually, from its inception to when I finally retired in 1998.
It's amazing to me all that you had to do, and especially as you described making that transition to the Missouri Theater, because then you wanted to have good surroundings. You talk about getting the money to buy the place, and then you needed to continue to get support. You needed to have not only financial support, but also the seats filled for concerts, and at the same time, you're trying to put an orchestra together, and you're trying to choose music and a program. That's a lot of things to do all at the same time.
Well, but I had a lot of people helping.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife was my right arm, so to speak, and other people that I mean, gosh, we had to extend the stage, and we got a crew of volunteers, and we extended the stage. We did carpentry work and stuff like that. And there was one fellow a fellow named Litwiller, Dr. Litwiller. Whenever I needed something, I hesitated to say that we needed a computer, because he would actually say, "Well, here's a check for it," and there were a lot of wonderful people in those days, and that's not to say that they are not here now also, but when we were kind of like a family trying to put something together.
When you first, do you have any good stories about the Missouri Theater, the facilities itself, like something in the basement or something in the crawl spaces up top? Were any great discoveries there, or was it just kind of plain old theater that?
Well, the Missouri Theater had actually two curtains. Let's see, two curtains. And one of them was a big sort of velvet kind of thing, red, which had sort of fallen down somewhat, and was all full of dust. And for years, from 1928, when the theater was built, and this was in much long after it. But when the Commonwealth had it, when they showed movies, they would have another curtain which opened up as the movie started.
Yeah. Well,
all of this stuff had to come down. And there was a fellow named, I believe his name was Brown. This goes back many, many years. But we had to take this down, but it was, all of these curtains were held up by a big frame. I mean, really an immense frame that was bolted into the top of the, up near the roof of near the attic of the theater. And how to get this down? Well, of course, we borrowed ladders and whatnot and climbed up there. And I hate to say this in a way because it still frightens me, but we managed to disconnect the curtains. And finally, when we cut the last cord, the last chain that was there, the whole thing just fell down onto the stage. And, I mean, with a lot of noise, but, you talk about a dust storm. And we didn't realize we should have covered all the seats, and then we had to vacuum all the seats because the dust of years fell there. However, we had to take the frame off, which was metal, and there was a bolt, the last bolt that we had for the frame, and the only way to get over to it was on a plank about 12 inches wide and about 12 feet long. And I guess stupidly, I couldn't feel that anybody else should do it. So I walked across that plank and unloosed that last bolt, and then gingerly made my walk back. Got down as soon as I could.
Yeah, I bet.
But and the whole thing came down in segments. So, but these are some of the things. The other times when we would sit in the theater and loge seats, which are the seats that we currently, Lucy and I, my wife Lucy, and I usually sit in. Water would come down the side of the wall, and so we would always pray that it never rained during the concert time. We didn't mind, with snow we didn't have to worry about because it was summertime, but...
We're going to take a break, and we'll come back and do another segment with our guest. It's the Heritage Show, and our guest is talking about some great history for music in this community, and the orchestra and the Missouri Symphony Society and the Missouri Theater, which came about with the direction of our guest, Hugo Vianello. Back with more with him in a moment on KFRU.
This is the KFRU Heritage Series. More coming up on News Talk 1400, KFRU. This is the KFRU Heritage Series.
We continue on our conversation on the Heritage Show with Hugo Vianello. Now, is your title now Maestro Emeritus or Conductor? What is that?
Well, Maestro it's not, but Conductor Laureate.
Laureate, that's it.
My official title.
Now, what's the difference between, when is Maestro appropriate to use and not?
Well, Maestro comes from the Italian maestro, which means teacher. And usually that's a form of respect that is given to a conductor as the teacher of the orchestra. And, that it's like instead of saying Mr., you
Sure.
say Maestro.
Was it hard to get musicians to come and play in the summer series here in Columbia? What was that like to fill the orchestra?
Well, of course, they were paid, and not very much, I will say that. And so as a result of that, it was sometimes difficult to get really good players in there. But we were very fortunate. The word of mouth got out that we had a good program and that people enjoyed playing here, and the board people and the audience treated them very nicely and were appreciative of the fact that they did come. And as a result of that, we didn't have too hard a time.
What can you say about the audience for the classical music in Columbia at this time? Did they have favorites? You knew if I put this on the program, they're going to respond to this, or how much of this was trying to broaden the perspective of the audience? I don't know what goes through the mind of someone that puts together a program that want to be appealing.
Well, I took a great deal of time in trying to plan the programs. Excuse me. There are a number of factors that are involved. Number one is the length of the program.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to make the program too long because you wind up eventually tiring the audience. You don't want to make it too short because otherwise they'll feel they were cheated. And so I usually try to go towards 70 minutes of actual music. And then my general formula was to present something that was romantic, a classical piece, and a modern piece. And so that this way I would try to satisfy everybody in the audience. Now, if I presented I would work primarily with the romantic and contemporary music first. If I had a lot of a long composition that was a romantic piece, let's just say like a Brahms symphony, then what I would do is make the contemporary work short.
I see, sure.
And of course then fill out the time with a either a classical small symphony or an overture or something like that. And vice versa, if the music was a long modern piece, then I would reverse the order. But I felt that I kind of owed it to music to introduce new music, and we did. I mean, music, and the new music also was music that had not been heard in Colombia. Well, and so that was the general format.
I'm curious, you mentioned you were connected with Northwestern.
Yes.
And you taught there or directed there?
I was director of orchestral activities.
And then you worked with the Kansas City Symphony?
Yeah, with Kansas City twice. I went in Kansas City in 1956, I believe, and left there in 1965 to go to Lansing and also Northwestern. I had two positions at that time. And then in 1982, when I left Stevens, I was hired again by Kansas City as associate conductor, and so that's how.
You mentioned also in our first segment New York. You're from New York?
I'm originally from
New York City.
New York City. Greenwich Village.
Really? What was that like growing up there?
Well, my memory of that when I was about 4 or 5 years old was very sparse. But, you know, the houses, the house where I was born is still there. It's 106 Sullivan Street.
How about that? So after 4 or 5 years, then where did you move?
Oh, we moved to Brooklyn. And this was during the Depression. It was we were not rich by any means. And my dad, when he was 32, had a massive heart attack, and he managed to survive and all that. But it was tough for him to find a job. As a matter of fact, he was offered. I always tell people this. He actually was a very good fiddle player, but his vocation, or what brought bread on the table, was he was a tool and die maker and machinist, and eventually wound up working for the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and he used to run a 100-foot lathe, which wow. And he would put the grooves inside the 16-inch guns that they put, on the Missouri and all that. And so he really worked at it. But Dad was a neat guy, and the nice thing about him, whenever I think of him, the only thing I can really say about him is that I love him. He was that nice a guy. He spanked me and all that sort of, but that goes with the territory.
Were you on a trajectory always to be in music yourself?
No, I had different ideas. I started playing fiddle because my dad started teaching me, but I really liked baseball much better.
Were you a You're a Yankee fan, or were you?
No, I was a Giants
Brooklyn
fan
Dodgers.
living in Brooklyn.
Oh my gosh! Not even the Dodgers, Brooklyn Dodgers at that time. Giants fan.
The Giants fan, but the reason I started with the Giants is as a child, I always felt that the Dodgers, in my child's mind, were people that moved very quickly and chased around. Whereas the Giants were big, tall, husky guys. So the big, tall, husky guy.
You're looking at the literal meaning of their mascot names. I like that. That's pretty fun. But you got into music and had a great career with the music. We have 60 seconds left. What do you think about the setting of Columbia now for the opportunities that exist in music and classical music?
Well, they're certainly a heck of a lot better than they used to be because the population here has grown. It's around 100,000 now, and when we first came here, it was around 40,000. And I mean, I see so many things that have changed. As a matter of fact, I go downtown now, and I almost think I'm in another city. I mean, all these high rises, the apartments and stuff.
It's taken a different tone. I appreciate, I can remember when I first moved here, I was aware of certain things that were going on and how much you had done with the symphony. And so I thank you for your contribution to that scene in this community, and also thank you for agreeing to come on the Heritage Show and let us pick your brain for a while. Thank you.
I'm delighted, and any time, really. And not only that, but you are also doing a terrific job here in town. I
appreciate that. Thank you. Hugo Vianello has been our guest on the Heritage Show. And comments always welcomed at david.lyle@cumulus.com. Back next week with more of the Heritage Show on KFRU.
You've been listening to the KFRU Heritage Series, celebrating our history and heritage of Columbia and Boone County. Listen each Sunday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The KFRU Heritage Series. News Talk 1400 KFRU. Columbia.